1902, a 25-year-old engineer sat down to fix a printing problem. Not heat, not comfort. He had no idea he was about to move 60 electoral votes. Change when the U.S. government works. Make it possible to build a glass city in a desert that hits 120 degrees in July. History forgot his name almost completely. You've used his invention today. Maybe in the last 10 minutes. Stick around. This one gets bigger than you think. Picture summer with no relief. In the 1800s, heat wasn't an inconvenience. It was a daily threat you had to architect your entire life around. Houses in the South had 12-foot ceilings, just to push the hot air somewhere, anywhere, above your head. Families dragged their mattresses onto screened porches because bedrooms were unlivable. Sleeping indoors in July could mean a sleepless, miserable night, sometimes worse. And it wasn't just homes, it was the government. The U.S. Senate chamber had a glass dome that baked lawmakers like a greenhouse. One senator called it the worst, most poisonous room he'd ever sat in. Members got sick, some died. So for 140 years, Congress simply refused to work in summer, show up in December, leave by June. Outrun the heat before it killed you. Heat decided where cities could grow. Heat decided who got rich. Heat ran the calendar of the most powerful government on Earth. Nobody thought that could change. Heat was weather. Weather was God's problem. One engineer was about to disagree. He just didn't know it yet. The kid who couldn't do fractions, Willis Carrier, was born in 1876, outside Buffalo, New York. Not a genius, not even close. As a kid, fractions broke his brain so badly, his mother had to cut up actual apples on the kitchen table just to get the math to stick. He scraped a scholarship to Cornell, graduated an engineer in 1901, and landed the most boring job imaginable: designing heating systems for lumber dryers and coffee roasters in Buffalo. Nobody puts that on a movie poster. Then in 1902, a printing company in Brooklyn called with a complaint. Their color prints kept coming out blurry. Not bad ink. Humidity. The paper swelled in the summer air between print runs, throwing every color out of alignment. Pages looked like a watercolor left out in the rain. The job landed on Carrier's desk like an afterthought. On July 17, 1902, he signed off on a machine that pushed air across cold coils and wrung the moisture out before it touched the presses. It worked. Nobody asked for comfort. They wanted dry paper. But Carrier had just cracked something nobody had figured out. Control the humidity, and the temperature follows for free. Every cooling attempt before him chased cold air alone. He'd found the actual lever, the fog that changed everything. For years, Carrier quietly collected clients. A silk mill in Japan, tobacco warehouses, candy factories. Anyone whose product fell apart in the heat called him. Then came the moment Carrier himself called the real breakthrough. Standing on a foggy train platform in Pittsburgh, watching mist roll across the tracks, it hit him. Fog is just air cooled to the exact point water drops out of it. If nature could do that by accident on a train platform, he could do it on purpose, indoors, with total precision. He published the math in 1911, founded his own company in 1915 with 6 engineers and $32,000. By 1922, he'd built a machine powerful enough to cool a building, not just a room. Carrier had built the engine. He had no idea what it was about to drive. The night Hollywood changed forever, movie theaters had a dirty summer secret. Audiences vanished. Nobody wanted to sit packed shoulder to shoulder in a sealed, sweating room. Theaters just gave up. Cheap reruns, slashed tickets, wait for fall. Carrier saw his shot. His machines were already keeping shoppers from fainting in department store basements. If it could save a fainting shopper, it could save a movie night. Memorial Day weekend, 1925. Times Square. Paramount's flagship theater, the Rivoli. The crowd walked in carrying folding fans, fully expecting to sweat through the whole picture. like always. The system ran late. For a few minutes, it looked like a disaster. Then the air shifted. Quietly, no announcement. Fans started dropping into laps, one by one. The people are going to like it. He had no idea. Within months, marquees across the country stopped selling movies. They started selling the room. Refrigerated air. Come in. It's cool inside. People bought tickets to films they didn't even care about, just to sit in the cold for 2 hours. The machine walks into Congress. By 1928, Carrier's machines were humming inside the U.S. Capitol. The same glass dome chamber that had been making senators sick for 70 years. A newspaper called it the end of the broiling, death-dealing business of summer lawmaking. Sounds great. It wasn't entirely. Because for 140 years, that brutal summer heat had been a deadline. Finish your work by June, or it waits a year. Once the chamber went cold, that deadline quietly vanished. Sessions crept later and later. The fiscal year, which had always ended June 30th, right when Congress went home, eventually got shoved to September 30th to match a government that suddenly never had to stop. So the next time you hear about a government shutdown fight in September that traces back to a Brooklyn engineer fixing some smudged ink in 1902, Carrier didn't just cool a room. He removed the one thing that used to force Congress to finish its business. The map redraws itself after World War II. Home units finally got cheap enough for regular families. Sales crossed 1 million a year by the early 50s. That's when the real earthquake started. Before this, the South and Southwest were basically written off in summer. Businesses in Houston shut down for the season. The country's real power, money, politics, presidents, sat in a tight corridor between Boston and Chicago. Then heat stopped being a deal breaker. Factories fled south for cheap land. Workers followed the jobs. Retirees followed the workers. Texas's population exploded 170% between 1950 and 2000. Phoenix went from a dusty outpost to one of the fastest-growing cities in American history. And here's the part nobody talks about. The people flooding south weren't the same people who'd always lived there. They skewed older, richer, more conservative. Between 1940 and 1980, hot states gained 29 electoral votes. Cold states lost 31. A 60-vote swing engineered, quite literally, by a machine. A political analyst coined the term Sun Belt in 1969 to describe exactly this. Nixon built a strategy around it. By 1980, Reagan's entire winning coalition stood on a region that, 2 generations earlier, had been hemorrhaging people, not gaining them. A man trying to stop ink from smudging in Brooklyn had quietly shifted the center of American political power 500 miles south. The city that shouldn't exist. The wildest version of this story isn't even in America. It's in the desert. In the early 1950s, a British banker in Dubai threw a dinner party and bragged to his guests about his brand new air conditioner. No matter how spicy the food, he promised, they'd stay cool. Halfway through the meal, the machine died. Everyone sat there sweating through curry in a desert summer anyway. That's where Gulf air conditioning stood in 1950, a fragile novelty. Within 20 years, oil money and mechanical cooling did something architecture alone never could. Glass towers, indoor malls the size of small towns, airports built directly on sand. None of it survives without non-stop, total air conditioning. Step outside in July at 120 degrees unprotected, and you're in real medical danger within minutes. Engineers there will tell you flat out, without this invention, modern Dubai doesn't exist. Not at this scale, maybe not at all. The machine turns on itself. Here's the twist. Carrier never lived to see. The same machine that built the Sun Belt and raised cities out of sand is now feeding the very crisis it was built to escape. Cooling buildings burns roughly 10% of all electricity on Earth. Every air conditioner pumps hot exhaust outside which heats the air which demands more cooling. A loop with no exit. There are over 2 billion air conditioning units running worldwide right now. That number is projected to triple within 30 years. There's even early evidence the Great Migration is starting to reverse. Americans quietly drifting back out of the hottest counties. The heat carrier's machine, once defeated, might be starting to win some of it back. Closing. Willis Carrier died in 1950. The same year home air conditioning finally crossed 1 million units sold. He saw the beginning. He never saw the rest. Never saw Congress's calendar stretch into fall. Never saw 60 electoral votes shift south. Never saw glass towers rise out of the Arabian sand. Never saw 2 billion machines humming across the planet. He just wanted to stop some ink from smudging. That's the pattern, every single time. Someone solves a tiny, unglamorous problem. Nobody notices what they actually built until decades later, when the whole world has quietly rearranged itself around it. So next time you walk into a cold room on a brutal day, and don't think twice about it, that's him, the man who fixed some ink and ended up moving half a country. If this is the kind of history that never made your textbooks, subscribe.